What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? When I was in high school, a friend asked me and two other friends to his house for dinner. His mom served homemade bean soup, which was very good. Toward the end of the main course, she brought out chocolate cake for dessert. She cut each of us a slice and plopped it into our bowls, in which we each still had about an inch of soup. Us guests exchanged puzzled glances, but the family dug right in, so apparently chocolate cake soaked in bean soup was an ordinary thing for them. Story 2. I'll be the weird family, although this doesn't quite fit the normal since no one thought it was normal. I had a huge zit on my ass that was incredibly painful, and it was deep under the skin. I couldn't pop it no matter what, and in my extreme pain sitting down, I asked my dad to pop it. He said, "All right." My dad then put on gloves to pop the zit. Anyway, in the middle of all this, my sister's friend walks in on us at full speed as we were behind a wall that connects the hall sector to the living room, so she was real close. She gasps and walks out of the room. Yeah, there we go. Story 3. My childhood best friend lived with his grandparents. His grandfather was a clockmaker. He mostly restored them. Their large two-story houses' walls were covered in old restored grandfather and cuckoo clocks. Each one had a small sticker with a number so he could keep track of them all. The highest number I saw was over 700. I would say 25% of them were wound, so every hour you were treated to a symphony of clocks. I didn't appreciate it when I was a kid, but those clocks were fantastic pieces of workmanship. Story 4. This happened when I was like 6. I needed to use the bathroom at a friend's house, and he led me to his parents' bathroom. The place was filled with crap of all sorts. Boxes, magazines, an inflatable pool, lots of other stuff. You could barely get in there. He pulled out a drawer from the installed cabinet by the entryway and said to pee in there. I thought he was joking until he went ahead and peed in there himself. I couldn't argue with that, so I too peed right in there. Then he shut the drawer, and we went and played more Ninja Turtles. I have no idea what became of that drawer/house family. Story 5. When I was a kid, the neighbor's TV was always at 75% volume or higher. They'd literally sit in the living room and scream at each other over the TV on blast. Story 6. One time I was at my friend's house while his dad was working late. His mom brought home 2 Little Caesars pizzas for us, his brother and his parents. By the time his dad got home from work, there was no pizza. So, his dad just made himself a salad for dinner and no one got screamed at until they cried. Story 7. I have an opposite one because I had the weird family. In high school, I had a sleepover, and one friend went to the kitchen in the middle of the night and saw my dad inebriated in his underwear and stained shirt in front of the fridge, drinking mustard out of the bottle. Monday rolls around and the rumors have spread, and I was like, wait, all your dads don't do that too? By the way, he did, in fact, have his own separate mustard bottle. Story 8. I had a friend in high school whose mother was from Jamaica. His family would colon cleanse together every year. I guess it was customary from his mom's culture. So literally, they'd take medicine to make themselves crap their brains out for a day or two every year. Notable mention, they only had one bathroom. Story 9. When I was 15, I was doing this nature program over the summer. I made friends with one of the girls there. We hit it off really well. When we found out that we lived near each other, she invited me over for a sleepover. Her family was cool, and I didn't have any issues until later on. I had to use the bathroom and asked where it was. The mom told me that they were having a little problem with the toilet. I didn't think anything of it until I went and saw the toilet. The toilet did not work at all. They just had a plastic bag in it. There was so much poop, pee, and even used pads in it. It was just there for everyone to see. I almost started gagging. I don't know how long they kept the bag there, but it smelled awful. Everyone there acted like it was a casual thing. Till this day, I never found out if it ever got fixed. Story 10. Amount of smoke alarm battery warning beeps, all going off every 10 minutes. No need to replace the batteries. Just get used to the beeps going off randomly, and then sometimes all at the same time. How do you live or even sleep with that happening? Story 11. A neighbor's dad was an avid fisherman, and he used these electrode things in the lawn to get worms to come up that he was going to use as bait. He would also eat some of the first ones to come up to check if they tasted right. If not, he would remove the electrodes and try again another day. Story 12. I stayed at this friend's house for the first time. So we were sitting at the kitchen table, eating noodles, and his mom said something, to which he screamed back at her, "Get ducked, Sharon." She didn't even bat an eyelid, didn't even care. I couldn't help thinking what would happen if I tried that at home. It would have been at least an ass-whooping. Story 13. His mom walking around topless, barking a chore list while we just sat around the coffee table, working on homework. She was a single mom working multiple jobs. They were latchkey kids. They didn't even bat an eyelash, but the minute she saw a new face sitting on the rug, boring a hole into the distant wall, she shifted on a dime, ducked into the mudroom, threw on her shirt, and brought out a carton of Oreos from a secret stash and was pretty much shocked into silence. I think she was terrified I'd misappropriate it to my parents, but all we cared about was cookies. Story 14. One of the first times I met my husband's family, I was over at their house, and husband gestured for me to sit down and be comfortable. Their house was really very cluttered. Not quite hoarder cluttered, but close. They had a couple of couches facing each other and then some other chairs. Not knowing the rules, I sat on one of the couches, which had a lot of stuffed teddy bears on it. You would think I had sat down on live bears. There were probably 20-30 small, medium stuffed bears on this couch. Husband's mother and twin brother both visibly reacted as if I had damaged the bears. Not antique bears either. That was when I was told that the couch was for the bears, and only for the bears, and that no one was allowed to sit on the bears' couch. Just the bears. The bears all had little beaded necklaces with their names on them to tell them apart because they were all the same brand and style. Story 15. My friend's mom always gave me a box of food when I came over. One day as I left, she just handed me a box of Hot Pockets, as if it was just a small trinket. Story 16. So when I was younger, my dad died. My mom remarried and had 2 kids. I was moved into the basement. Unfinished basement. I didn't think anything of it since I was 10. I had a sheet blocking my area from the laundry area. It had bared concrete walls, wood beams and piping across the ceiling, and cement flooring. Used a heater and dehumidifier because it was cold and humid. When I used the heater, my parents would make my sheeted area around my bed so it would heat up the space quicker. Parents didn't allow any of my friends over, and my brother and sister weren't allowed in my room. Distant family members also never stayed over, and when we had family gathering, I was told to go into the guest room instead of my room while they were there. I thought, cool, I have a huge room and no one can mess it up. My family would go on vacations yearly without me. From when I was 12 till I was 18, I was the dog and house watcher. During one of those vacations when I was 17, I invited a friend come over. They pointed out how ducked up it was that there were bedrooms fully furnished with TVs for my brother and sister, a guest room fully furnished as well with a TV, and how I was in the basement with sheets for walls and bathroom mats on the floor. I completely dismissed it because it was normal to me. It wasn't until I was 20 that I found out that the family trips that I didn't go on were paid for with money that I was getting from my dad passing away. I'm sure I got some of the money in food and clothes and whatever I needed, but it's got me pretty ducked up because my brother and sister don't have any memory of it. And when I talk about it, they always back my parents by saying we were raised right and I opted out of vacation. They also thought the guest room was my room. Story 17. Went to friend's house as a kid, sitting at the dining table for lunch. House phone rings. Everyone falls to the floor around me, including the mom and dad. I'm the only one left sitting there. The dad informs me that I now must answer the phone. Hello, Johnson's house. I hold the phone out to the dad. It's for you. Everyone laughs. I'm so uncomfortable. The next time that phone rang, I was the fastest to the floor, I can tell you that. Such a fun-loving family. Loved going around there. Story 18, telling me the snake had escaped its tank and hadn't been seen a few days, but that it was okay, it's usually curled up inside the settee I was sitting on. Story 19, went to my friend's house, walked in, and his dad and stepdad were playing Sorry while smoking, and his mom was with some random dude on the couch. She gave us $20 and told us to go get a couple large pizzas and come back. I don't know what was weirder that my friend was like, it's not even my dad's week with me, all incredulous. Or when we got back that his dad and makeout dude was gone. Table all set for pizza, and his stepdad and mom acted like it was just a normal Wednesday. Story 20. Is the most horrifically filthy place you have ever seen humans live and count as weird. A pal I'd known from middle school. I went to see him 6 years after graduation. He was living with someone, and they had a kid, and all of them lived in a little 2-bedroom place. I get there, and then smell hit me at the door. The carpet had been some kind of shag, but matted down to just stuff. The kitchen had a sheet over the doorway. I could not believe my eyes. All the surfaces in the place were just caked with dishes, glasses, boxes, etc. I couldn't and didn't look too long. See, all of it was covered in thick, green, fuzzy mold. The sink had standing water covered with a blanket of mold. I was in there for all of 4 seconds. After I came out of there, I asked to use the restroom. Big mistake. The sink, tub, and toilet were black. Sink due to hair dye, tub due to filth and black slime, and the toilet was the same. The area between the tub, toilet, and sink was jam full of what I think had been towels, but they had sat rotting and growing slime. It was just a big, smelly lump of horror. Yes, CPS was called about the situation. Story 21. Slept over at a friend. She was the only girl in her family and had 5 brothers. Everything about my friend's room, sleeping situation was normal. But her brother's room was bizarre. They shared one big room with 3 bunk beds. Each mattress, a fitted sheet, a pillow, and nothing else. No top sheets, no blankets, no comforters. Also, the boys didn't have pajamas. They all just slept in the clothes they had worn that day, with their shirts tucked into their pants and belts on too. Their room didn't have a door, and neither did their connected bathroom or their closets. Story 22. went to a friend's house that had dog crap all over the floor, roaches by the thousand, including dead in the microwave and freezer. And to make matters worse, they had a healthy dose of bedbugs too. His excuse was he's busy from working all day. This guy was a hairstylist too. Yikes. Story 23. Family had like styrofoam bricks next to the couch in the living room for the explicit purpose of throwing at the TV if they didn't like the show or if a character said something stupid. Story 24. Not really weird, I guess, but first time in my husband's parents' house, just a friend at the time, I got to see what a hoarder house looked like. It wasn't even a well-known term condition back then, so it just really shocked me seeing the giant mounds of stuff everywhere and having to navigate through it all. His room was clean, the rest of the house, not so much. Story 25, kind of the opposite. Had a friend over when my dad went on a tirade, screaming and yelling at my brother and I. We thought it was normal to have emotionally abusive parents. After that, that friend never came over again. I went to his house, and his parents seemed a bit more interested in me. By the time we graduated high school, I got my diploma and walked over to hug his parents before my own at the ceremony. Story 26. When I was younger, I was best friends with two brothers from Jamaica. One of the days they asked me to stay over so we could play some Atari after we finished playing outside. We came home 12 minutes after their curfew, so their dad, who was extremely calm, told us to sit in the living room. I sat in there with my two friends and they were super quiet, which was a bit weird until their dad walked in with a belt and beat them. I crapped myself, not literally, because I thought I was in for a beating, but he didn't hit me, which was a huge relief. After the beating, he, their dad, asked if I would like some carrot juice, while my friends just went back to normal and set up their Atari like nothing happened. I was sat on the sofa wondering what the duck just went on. Story 27. Had a friend whose family lived on a huge property and kept cows for the property tax exemption. Not odd. He told me to come by and get some purple ringers he collected for me. Invited me in to meet his parents, and there was a full-size cow chilling on one of their couches in the living room. That sight was way more wild than any of the hallucinations later experienced. Really nice people, though. Story 28. I remember going over to a neighbor's apartment once and finding out what a true hoarder's home looks like. Just piles and piles of junk, furniture, trash, filth everywhere. There were apparently two gerbils, I vaguely recall, coming over to see, but they would frequently get out of their cage and wander lost amongst the mountain of stuff. The two brothers that lived there just shrugged it off, would brush off as much crap off the couch as possible and so I could sit on something that resembled the couch's upholstery. Didn't really want to play Nintendo anymore after the initial shock of how hoarders live. Story 29. I babysat for a family on occasion, and the kids would always ask for a cool cup, and I had no clue what it was. They asked for them constantly, but were too little to really describe them enough for me to understand. I mentioned it to the mom in passing one day, and she started laughing and cut the tops off of some bell peppers and took out the seeds and then filled the peppers with tap water. The kids went nuts over them like they were treats. It was really weird to me that drinking water out of bell peppers was a thing to beg for on the regular. Story 30. In high school, I went to my boyfriend's house for the first time. There was absolutely no food in the fridge, and his house was so dirty. I asked where his mom was. She just lived downstairs with her boyfriend. He only saw her every few weeks. Coming from a family that ate supper together every night, this was so sad. I always brought him leftovers after that. Story 31. More of a date story. Was on a date with a guy who was cooking dinner for me, and his dog took a giant horse piss in the living room. I jumped up, a bit panicked, trying to get the guy's attention to what just happened. The guy didn't even look up when he said, "Oh yeah, she does that sometimes." And that was it. I asked him if there was a towel and disinfectant I could use to help clean it up. And the guy says, "I'll just throw some Febreze on it after dinner." I suddenly realized the musty smell I noticed earlier wasn't from his cool and rustic cabin being under a canopy of trees, or that the floor in the same location that bowed when you stepped over it was because it was old. Ate dinner at a table that was a couple feet away from the dog toilet. Left, ducking gross. Story 32. Sit down at the dinner table with friend, his dad, mom, bro, and sis. Dad just casually put some adult film on their big screen TV when nobody had one really, and they were enormous, while we're all just eating dinner. Doesn't skip a beat as he goes right back to his plate. That friend is now famous. Story 33. Growing up in rural East England, had a friend who lived on a working farm. They had this stereotypical big English farmhouse, lovely old place. No flat floors or straight walls anywhere. Anyway, downstairs was an interesting layout. They had a room that was almost hidden away that you could easily miss unless you knew it was there or noticed it from outside. So this room, I only ever went in once, maybe twice in many years of being friends and going over their house quite a lot. It was their Christmas room. It has decorations up all year round. And during the year when they bought presents, they'd wrap them and just put in the room and leave them there until Christmas. It was awesome in a sense though, a whole room for "this is great, Often when it came to Christmas time, they'd forgotten what something was that they got for another family member. Story 34. I had a friend whose family didn't speak at all when they ate dinner. The first time I ate there, I tried to make conversation and got a super weird glare and shake of the head from the mom. After dinner was done, everyone would just go back to doing whatever. I remember thinking at the time, while I ate in awkward silence, why would anyone want to eat like this every day? I come from a family of 8 where dinners were chaos, so maybe I was conditioned too far the other way. Story 35. I shared a house with a bunch of people who regularly set their farts on fire. I don't know why. They just did. Even when they were not drunk, this appeared to be normal behavior for them. Story 30s. They let the dogs and cats into the basement to go to the bathroom, even though they had a fenced-in backyard. The whole house smelled. Even the kids when they went to school. Story 37. I celebrated Christmas with my HS girlfriend's family one year. It was her mother's turn to open her presents, and she opened one from her daughter, then one from her other daughter, then finally one from her husband. Then her husband started pulling tiny hidden gifts for his wife from everywhere. Earrings from the couch cushion, necklaces, bracelets, a bag of candy, and flowers. He had at least a dozen presents hidden everywhere, from behind the curtains, in a lampshade, behind the TV, in a closet. They just kept coming, and he had the biggest grin on his face. When he was done, he wished her a Merry Christmas, told her he loved her, and kissed her right on the mouth in front of me. It was wonderful, but extremely weird to me. It wasn't until that display of love and joy for his wife that I realized I had never once seen my own parents act the least bit affectionate towards each other, that I'd never heard them say, "I love you" to each other. That's when I realized it was my family that was weird. It wasn't until that display of love for his wife that I realized that it was manly to be romantic and to show love and affection. Her parents were wonderful people, and I will always regard them as role models. I hope they're doing well all these years later. Story 38. In second grade, my friend's parents were separating, and the dad kept screaming at his wife through the phone. The kids acted like it was normal, but I was freaked out. I'd seen parents argue, but not lose all respect for each other. My mom told me the next day that I was to call her if that happened again. She thought it close to becoming a domestic incident. Story 39. My house. But looking back, it's unusual. My dad was a doctor, and it was not uncommon for him to take a patient's blood on the way home and store it in the fridge next to the orange juice overnight, then take it to work the next morning. Can't do that these days, of course, but the 70s was pretty wild. Story 40. When I was in JR High, I went over to a friend's house for the first time. His parents were hoarders, and their basement was waist-deep in newspapers, magazines, junk mail, catalogs, phone books, and other loose papers. You had to crawl over it to get to his room. He acted like it was no big deal that the papers were higher than the couch, or that an avalanche happened every time he opened his bedroom door. That was the only time I went over. Story 41. Was sleeping over at a friend's house. 3 p.m., we show up to her house after school. We walked into her apartment to find her mom half-dressed, passed out. TV was on and blaring. Didn't even notice our arrival. I had zero experience with this kind of thing, and although I could tell my friend was embarrassed, I didn't understand the full implications or really what was happening. I pretty much just thought it was an odd place for a nap, which is how I explained it to my parents later when I commented on how odd it was to be napping there instead of in bed. I might have even asked them if they would let me sleep on the couch and watch TV too. Bless my parents for immediately understanding the situation but not making a scene and not spoiling my naivete or ever embarrassing my friend in any way. My family is pretty good at being subtle, for better or worse. However, that was absolutely the last time I stayed at her house. All sleepovers with that particular friend were at my house from then on. But it was a casual coincidence from my POV. I didn't even notice that subtle change for a couple years. Looking back, I think my friend really appreciated it though. We're still friends, and she has kids of her own, and she's doing great. Is a doctor, but her mom still has the same alcohol struggles and is very in-your-face about it even now as she was then. Story 42. My friend's dad collected pipe organs. He had several electric and electronic consoles. One time I took a trip across the country, disassemble a full pipe organ, and pack it home. They bought a geodesic dome and rebuilt the organ inside it. You entered in pipes. There were pipes on the walls, great chests for the living room floor. The living room was a console, and they literally lived inside a musical instrument. Story 43, 15 years ago. Visit a friend house who live in San Francisco around 3rd Street, bad neighborhood area. Upon entering, passed by the kitchen, 4 gas stove flame was in full blast, not cooking anything, no vent. You can literally see a big burn hole in the ceiling all the way through the 2nd floor room. His mom was upstairs, one of those rooms far away from the bottom floor kitchen, watching TV in full blast. Long story short, they are basically using their gas stove as a centralized heater for the whole house. I'm a certified fire safety director at my work. This almost gives me a heart attack. Story 44. My friend who's Australian like me Has parents who emigrated to Australia from Scotland. She speaks with an Australian accent. I visited her parents' house with her and she started speaking with a Scottish accent. I was like, WTF are you doing? Found out that's just how she speaks with her parents. Story 45. Not at my friend's house, but we went for a walk to her mom's friend's house to get her some smokes. We walked into the house and the floor was covered in roaches, animal poop, used nappies, diapers, and rubbish. There was peanut butter on the walls and kitchen table. Story 46. At a sleepover for a friend's birthday, her mom made us spaghetti, and after dinner, she threw the rest of the leftover spaghetti in the pot in the trash. Maybe I just grew up with frugal parents, but we saved that kind of leftover in a Tupperware for lunches and stuff. I was shocked to see it wasted. Story 47. First time I ever slept at a friend's house in middle school, we had the microwave White Castle burgers for breakfast the next day, and he said that is his normal breakfast. It blew my mind. Next time I slept over, we had Elio's frozen pizza. He also usually only ate breakfast and would have fruit throughout the rest of the day. I normally only saw him eat fruit, so it was that much more odd that we were having frozen White Castle for breakfast. Story 48. Went to this girl's house in primary school. I'm ashamed to say it was because I felt bad that she was getting bullied at school, and in hindsight, she had a learning disability. And anyway, she had a brother, and I saw her mom reading a book titled How to Be a Good Mom, or something similar. She started screaming at this toddler for not vacuuming his room and referencing the book. I was like, ma'am, you expect this he to vacuum his room? To be fair, he did end up doing it, but mind blown. Their family had a really weird dynamic. Story 49. When I was 7, I went over to play with a new friend, and she asked if I wanted a snack. I said sure, and we went into their playroom, where there was a mini fridge just stacked with candy, full bars of everything, and she casually tossed me a pack of Rolos. Now, the house was a manufactured home. Not a trailer per se, but definitely not like the usual house either. I know this doesn't indicate how much money the family had, but this was not in an upscale neighborhood or house. I marveled at A, the largest amount of candy I have still to this day ever seen, and B, the fact that she and her siblings all just had free access to it at such young ages. She was surprised at my surprise and asked, what did I keep in my snack fridge? I told her I didn't have one of those, and then it was her turn to be absolutely gobsmacked at the idea that I didn't have a mini fridge full of candy just at my disposal and whim. Story 50. My friend's mom kept bread in the glove box of her car for when she got hungry. He thought it was hilarious also, and we gave her a pretty bad time about it. Story 51. I'm Sicilian. One time I went to a friend's house, and they made spaghetti because, hey, I'm Sicilian. I'm watching her make the sauce, and this lady starts dumping in sugar like she's making Kool-Aid. Absolutely the worst pasta I've ever had. They loved that crap though. Story 52. My dad was a truck driver who was able to bring home boxes of food if its packaging was damaged. All my friends would go home with full boxes of Cap'n Crunch and pancake mix. After a while, my friends would have to tell my dad that their parents told them to come home empty-handed. Story 53. Being sent up to the friend's room while the famine friend was eating dinner. Yes, this was common practice in Sweden in the 80s and early 90s, but it's still ducked up. Why am I sitting here alone playing Game Boy while you peeps are eating? Story 54. I will never forget the family that shared milk. If you didn't finish it, it got poured into someone else's glass or the carton, including the friend guest. For some reason, drinking someone else's backwash milk is repulsive to me. Story 55. I had a friend in middle school whose family was really into trophy hunting. Something I didn't know until I went to a sleepover at her house. Animals everywhere. But the weirdest part was she didn't have sheets on her bed, just animal fur. She slept naked on the fur and had no idea it was weird. I faked a stomach ache and had my mom pick me up. Story 56. My GF and her little brother were staying at a sort of foster home that was absolutely filthy. They knew it was, but weren't going to complain about it since it was still better than their last situation. But the parents there had 2 little boys of their own, and it's their normal. I feel bad that those boys will either realize their home is disgusting and never invite anyone over, or have someone over who then embarrasses them or doesn't want to be their friend anymore because of it. Story 57. Back in high school, I was at friend's house. We had 4 or 5 guys and a couple girls over having some drinks. Eventually, the girls went upstairs to use the restroom and us guys patiently waited. The host opened up a closet door and pulled out this 5-gallon piss-filled Poland Spring bottle and said to have at it. We politely declined and left a short while later. Story 58. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and my mom pushed me to be friends with people within the religion. One girl was only allowed to talk to people within the religion, so she was homeschooled. She was allowed to watch 1 movie or 1 TV show a day, rated GPG with approval. 3 of us, age 16, watched Lion King 2, then her parents made us go to bed at 730 in the summer. She also wasn't allowed to have any posters on her wall, as that was viewed as idol worship. Her parents came in to approve our prayers for the night. I left feeling super bad for her. Story 59. What the heck? Went to a friend's house and went to the bathroom, and they had 4 towels hanging on a towel bar near the toilet with brown marks. I asked what it was, and my friend said they don't have toilet paper. They each had their own crap towel and hung them up after each use. When I mentioned it to my mom, I was told I couldn't go to Joey's house anymore. Story 60. Eating family dinner in complete silence. Then again, I am the weirdo who laughed through the entire thing. The silence was too awkward and funny for me. I'm laughing now just thinking about it. Story 61. My family were very comfortable, and my mom always babysat lots of kids from around the neighborhood. Basically, her place was just where the kids hung out. Once there was an emergency with my dad, and my mom really needed somebody to watch me overnight, and I wound up with one of the families that she babysat for. They were really nice people, and I was close friends with their kids, obviously, because they were at my house every day. It was a new experience, though. This was the first time I'd ever seen people living in real poverty. I was kind about it and I didn't say anything, but parts of it were a real shock to me. The toilet didn't work, but they had just continued to use it to the point that it was piled up to the seat. We had to unscrew the light bulb to turn off the lights because the switch would shock you if you touched it. I felt really bad for them. It was just a real eye-opener for me as a kid, and it gave me a much better understanding of exactly why my mom babysat and fed all those kids. Story 62. Went with a few friends to one of their family's houses for a birthday party. We smoked, swam, and had a great old time. After eating, we settled in to watch a horror movie, and at some point I looked around me and everyone in that family was sitting in the same crisscross applesauce position and slowly rocking back and forth while watching TV. Definitely not the weirdest thing on this thread by far, but something about it was extremely creepy. They were nice as hell though. Story 63. An old school friend of mine invited me over to eat. They ate noodles with sugar. That's it, with a glass of water. He told me they were eating this pretty often. Story 64. Roaches crawling around in daylight out in the open. I wouldn't sit or eat anything the 3 times I went over. His entire family seemed to think it was normal to have roaches where he was. I had family in the same building, and their house was almost sterile. Story 65. I've got one from the opposite perspective. So to paint the picture, I invited a few people over for my birthday party. The plan was a sleepover with video games and board games. Sounded great to my nerdy friends and I. Well, the day of the party comes along, and one of my friends gets dropped off by the school bus with me. We walk inside, and there's no pizza yet, and the cake hasn't been picked up. I ask my dad, and he starts screaming about how my mom will pick them up on her way from work. She won't be home until 7 p.m. at the earliest, and my friends will be arriving around 4 p.m. After my friend and I left the room, my friend, from now referred to as Mark, not his name, asked me if something is wrong and why my dad was so mad. It was normal for him to be that mad when he forgot something. The rest of my friends show up around 4 p.m. Friends Bill, Bob, and Frank, also not their name. I offer them fruit snacks when they arrive and tell them pizza should be there around 7:30 p.m. So we're taking turns on Gran Turismo 4. When Bill asks if my parents are home, he'd like to meet them. I tell him that my dad's home, but he's sleeping right now as he gets up kind of early. This was a lie. He was taking his medicine, what I'd later that evening find out was substances, and would be occupied for a while. And my mom would be getting out of work around 7 p.m., which was true. The lie seemed to work, and we continued playing games. 8 p.m. rolls around, and my mom gets home. She has no pizza or cake. I greet when she comes into the living room. She asks us if we ate the pizza and cake already. I tell her that Dad told us she'd be getting them. She asked where my dad was, so I told her their bedroom. She said she'd be right back and went to their bedroom. It wasn't long before you could hear them, clearly screaming at each other. I noticed them arguing was making my friends uncomfortable, but I was unfazed. It was them that I realized that what was going on wasn't normal. I felt awful. I told my friends that my parents would likely be arguing most of the night, and if they wanted to go home, I'd understand. They all wanted to go home. Due to the layout of the home, the kitchen was closer to the bedrooms than the living room, and that was where the phone was. So I went with each of my friends to the kitchen so they could call their parents to be picked up. The front door was also closer still. They each took turns calling their parents. I had to talk to Frank's parents for him as he was too shaken by what was going on. All the parents were there within the hour and picked up my friends. Mark was the last one to be picked up and asked if I wanted to hang out as his place for the night. I told him that if my parents found out I left without telling anyone, especially if I didn't leave a note saying where, they'd be even more angry. And I told him that I couldn't leave a note saying where I was going as I didn't want to have his parents dragged into it. We hugged and he left. My parents finished screaming at each other around 11 p.m. when my dad left, screaming about going to his buddy's place for the weekend. I was reading a book in the living room when my mom walked in and saw that everything was put away and all my friends were gone. She asked me where they went. I'll never forget the pain in her eyes when I said they each called their parents and went home already. For what I thought was normal, I thought everyone's parents argue endlessly. I thought everyone had a parent that they lied for. I thought everyone's parents lies to them constantly. I thought everyone's parents got angry at them without prompting. I thought everyone always looked for exits upon entering a new place. I thought everyone knew how to act without being seen. I thought everyone knew how to act under pressure. I haven't celebrated a birthday since, or even tried. I feel no drive to celebrate it is all. It does is remind me of that and many other horrible things around that time. I'm still friends with Mark all these years later. He's one of my only friends, and he's by far my closest friend. Story 66. Have explicit hot stickers all over her house. Her dad is so chill and doesn't care. It seems so weird for me coming from a house with parents who are very religious and slightly strict. Story 67. This crazy baddie lady who was our neighbor. We lived in a small town that still had party line, even in the early 90s, and fortunately, for us, we were on her party line. She was rude and nasty and always hogged up the phone anytime she'd be on the phone, which was often. And you tried to pick up the phone, she'd yell at you to get off the phone. Yet if you were on the phone and she wanted it, she'd barge in on your conversation and yell at you to get off so she could use it. Why we tolerated it, I never understood. Her son was in my class at school. She also was crazy religious and didn't believe children should have any toys. They could only play outside, never inside. So, of course, that meant he'd always come over to our house to play. Of course, we didn't tell on him. His mom was rude, not just on the phone, but even just going into her house. You could tell she was a very rude and miserable person. I cannot ever recall a single pleasant word she ever said to anyone. No one liked her at all. What's the scariest thing that happened to you when in someone else's house? Age 6-ish, slept over at a friend's house with my little brother. Her father woke us all up in the middle of the night, had us bundle up, and loaded us in the family minivan. He drove to a gas station and talked the whole way about how a bakery exploded behind their house. He said the resulting gases and such could hit us, so we had to try and drive as far away as possible. They were also our next-door neighbors, so I was worried about our parents' safety. At the gas station, our friend's mom bought us snacks while he canvassed the area. I told her I didn't hear any explosion and asked about my parents. She must have called them from a payphone during the snack run because they pulled up a few minutes later to take us home. I was, of course, terrified to go home. Later, our parents sat us down to explain that our friend's father was sick with something called schizophrenia that makes him hallucinate. Story 2. Sleepover at best friend's house when I was about 12. Middle of the night after we'd fallen asleep, he wakes up and starts screaming that his head is going to explode. Not a bad dream. He keeps going, just screaming and crying and thrashing around. His parents wake up, scoop him up, and rush him to the hospital. Turned out he'd just never had a headache before, and his first was apparently a doozy. Story 3. When I was 8 or 9, my friend's dad yelled at me, angrily, for pooping at their house. I lived down the street, so he told me that I should have went home to poop. Story 4. Me and 2 other friends was at a friend's house. Him and his brother were arguing. Then his older brother beat him. I tried to step in, then he shoved me in the wall. Then their father stepped in and starting going beat the older brother. Story 5. Spent many weekends at my friend's house. One day we discovered that her mom's boyfriend has a hidden camera in her room, under her desk. I was supposed to go on vacation with them, and my mom told me she didn't feel comfortable with him. We found that camera a week later. Thanks, Mom. Story 6. Slept over at my friend's house one summer night during high school. Woke up to his mom calling out to him because his stepdad was unresponsive and passed away during the night. Story 7. My friend lived down the street. Her mom had invited some girls to come hang out from our class, and she made us sandwiches, cookies, juice, popcorn, the normal girl day type of fun. We were in the garage playing. Her dad was either drunk or had an anger problem. He came in yelling at us, saying we were too loud. He grabbed my friend's mom by the arm and hit her. She started crying. Then he grabbed my friend and hit her. All right. Well, he proceeded to grab each girl and spank them hard. I ran away as fast as I could back to my house. I remember my friend consistently coming to school being real tired, sometimes falling asleep at her desk. Story 8. Not technically in someone else's house, but I was babysitting a special needs 2-year-old, and the kid wanted to go play outside. No biggie, but since it was fall in Alaska, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too cold out. I stepped outside to check their thermometer. The door locked behind me. I had no phone, and since it was Alaska, the closest neighbor was too far away for me to leave the kid alone in the house to get help. So I ended up ramming into the door in a panic until the lock broke and I could get in. The kid was okay, got in the laundry, but otherwise had no idea anything was wrong. I thought I would get in trouble for breaking their door, but the mother said I could have broken a window, and she wouldn't have cared. The mom paid me $50 for it, though, and that's a lot of money for a 12-year-old. To be clear, I didn't break the door itself, just the lock. Their lock wasn't a standard deadbolt or anything. It was a gate latch that was opened by a hidden string on the outside. The door couldn't be unlocked because the string had wrapped around the locking bolt, so it would pull tighter the more it was pulled. I opened the door by slamming against it enough that the bolt bent and I could get my fingers in there to lift it. It took a good hour or two of bashing the door. They replaced it with a deadbolt the next day. Story 9. My cousin brings me to his friend's house. We all hang out in the basement. My Cousin forgets his cigarettes and asks if I can grab them from his car outside. I think nothing of it, go grab the cigs and start making my way back to the house. I walk in the house by myself when I run into the friend's dad. This guy's father, who I've never met, just looks me up and down and goes, "Who the duck are you? Why are you in my house?" This guy's flipping out, and I'm scared crapless until my cousin comes storming upstairs and clears everything up. All my cousin had to say was, "Frank, this is my cousin." And just like that, crisis averted. Love you, New Jersey. Story 10. Slept on a former friend's sofa. He decided to prank me by pretending to be a bugler wearing a ski mask. Then he pretended to try and kidnap me. Long story short, I broke his nose and we are no longer friends. Story 11. My best friend's dad was in the reserves and would come home late at night a lot. One time he had come home and we didn't notice. We were heading to the kitchen to go make bread and cheese, and we froze in the hallway because we saw someone kneeling in front of the fireplace, which wasn't lit. We proceed to freak the duck out, which wakes Dad up, and he comes out of his room laughing his ass off. Turns out, he thought it would be funny to set his duffel bag up, wrap his coat around it, hat on top, boots in front, and it looked just like some dude chilling with his head on his knees. Old Clarky boy. I miss him. He was so much fun. Completely unrelated story with him is, he bought a gold VW Golf, and when he came home with it, he burst in my friend's bedroom, where we were watching Dragon Ball, and yells, "I love gold," and runs off. He was always doing crazy crap. Story 12. I was in high school, and it was the first time I ever drank. I was asleep on the floor, and my friend was asleep on the bed with her. It was late at night, and the lights were off with the music playing. I'm a light sleeper, so the BF's drunk dad walked in and started peeing in the room. He didn't notice us there. Story 13. I house sat for my childhood crush as her family went on a 6-week road trip around the US. They had a cat and a bird, and you see where this is going. This stupid little finch got out of its cage. Legit, the cage was closed when I returned the next day, and the cat hit it. I was obviously scared out of my mind of being the guy who hit Crush's bird, so I did the only logical thing and went to the pet store and bought both of the finches they had that looked identical. I had about 2 weeks to figure out which was more like the cat bait, and then, not knowing what to do with the other, I kept it. They never found out, or told me if they did. And that's the story of how I ended up with a pet finch. House sitting was the wrong world. I went over every day to feed their animals, bring in the mail, etc. They lived pretty close to me. Story 14. One of my friends from childhood would have really bad night terrors. She would either wake up in the middle of the night screaming at the top of her lungs, or she would randomly jump up and start running for the front door trying to get away from whatever she thought was chasing her. It was always pretty terrifying waking up to her screaming or tripping over me while trying to get to the door. Story 15. My friend and I were alone at her house. Her parents were going through a nasty divorce, and her dad, who had anger problems, was not allowed to come near the house because the mom had a restraining order. He ended up banging on the door and trying to break in since he knew the mom wasn't home. We hid in my friend's room with a samurai sword while she called her mom to come home. Story 16. SWAT team busted through my best friend's house. Turns out her dad was wanted for substances. Fortunately, they hadn't seen him in several years. He's in prison now. Story 17. I was cat-sitting for some family friends. As I approached the house one evening, I noticed a light was on that hadn't been on that morning. I walked in the front door and yelled up the stairs, but didn't hear anything. There were small things that had been moved around, knife on the counter and some trinkets, etc., but nothing was missing except the cat never came running for its food. I checked all the rooms, but no sign of the kitty. I even checked the fridge and noticed the pepperoni had been moved from the shelf to the drawer. Why did the cat burglar move the damn pepperoni? Well, it turned out that the family had a maid that I didn't know about, and she had accidentally closed the cat in a closet. Story 18. I was a freshman in college when I spent Christmas with my high school buddy who didn't go with his family out of town. I went to his kitchen to get a drink when I looked out his kitchen window and saw 2 figures jumping his fence. Luckily, I saw them before turning on the lights so they didn't see me. I quietly told him to get ready to call the cops when I saw them making their way to his door. Without thinking, I ran to the door and opened it and yelled, "LAPD, freeze!" And luckily, the 2 figures got scared and ran away. Thinking back on it, they sounded really young and they were probably just gonna ding-dong ditch the place or something. But to be safe, I stayed with him until his family came home. Story 19. It was my house, but I'm sure this is the story my friend would tell. We were having a sleepover and they were going to sleep in our extra room that was used as a media game room. We were teens, so we had sodas, of course, and one got left on top of the TV unopened. Later, we were all going to settle in. I turned off the light, closed the door behind me on the way to my room, and then out of nowhere, I just hear a super loud and jarring boom come from behind me. I go back into the room, throw on the light, and the soda that was left on the TV had exploded and sprayed all over the room and everybody in it. So confusing and just bizarre. Nobody recalled it being there till after the fact. Story 20. A friend was doing some long-term house sitting and invited me over to hang. The owners were aware and okay with this. We went down into the basement, since that's where the TV was. We got about halfway down the stairs and see this thing sitting on a shelf. It was about the size of a small dog and kind of fuzzy. It didn't look alive, but the prospect of a dead thing was even worse. We noped out and went back upstairs to watch Netflix on the laptop instead. About a week later, my friend texted me. The thing was a mushroom garden that they'd put down there and apparently completely forgotten about. Story 21. At my friend's house, his parents and all of his siblings were home. Everyone but his dad was in the front room of the house. His dad was doing yard work in the backyard. I got up to go to the bathroom, and while passing the back door, saw that my friend's dad was on a ladder with an electric tree trimmer. Before I looked away and continued on, his dad fell off the top rung of the ladder and crashed hard on the ground. The tree trimmer was still somehow on and landed next to his body. The trimmer was going full horror movie and slowly moving towards him, and he was not getting up. I'm the only one who saw this happen. So I yelled, "Friend's mom, your dad fell, come quick," and ran outside to pick the trimmer up and move it away. By the time I turned it off and started focusing on him, everyone else was outside. We helped him up. The mom took him to the hospital for back pain and a mild concussion. The older siblings watched us while they were gone, and everyone was very thankful. I had to pee. Story 22. Sleeping over at my friend's house, and in the middle of the night we heard some rustling around in her enclosed patio, which was adjacent to the living room we were sleeping in. We shrugged it off because she had two very active outdoor cats who generally slept in the patio. When we woke up the next morning and went out there to eat breakfast, we saw the screen door had been slashed and several pieces of furniture, TV, etc., were gone. So the rustling we heard in the middle of the night were actually burglars. Not sure if they knew that several girls were in the living room, but still freaks me out a bit when I think about it. Story 23. I went over to this girl's house, really liked her. Her older brother told us about Bloody Mary, and she was ecstatic to try and summon her. So she asked me to come with her, and of course I said yeah. So we go in there, turn off the lights, shut the door, she starts chanting it, and the brother starts pounding on the door, screaming. When we tried to open the door, it was locked, and he kept pounding and screaming, "Oh, she's here, help!" After like a while, he finally let us out, laughing his ass off. Mirrors ducking scared the crap out of me, and I'm still wary of them, to this day. He didn't lock it. He was leaning against the door or put something against it. I used the word locked to describe that it wouldn't open. Story 24. And it's one of those memories where I'm not sure if it was real or just a crazy dream and it was too long ago to tell, but I'll tell it anyways. Was with a childhood friend at his house in the boonies. He lived in a real rundown house, but his neighbor down the road was pretty affluent with a great house. He said he wanted to go exploring, and being a kid in the desert, I was down for that. He led us to the house, where he somehow convinced us to climb through the guy's doggy door into the house. Pretty great house. I still remember the layout vividly. Anyways, here we were, exploring some random guy's house, when we hear a door open. My friend had thought the owner wasn't home because the neighbor's car wasn't in the driveway, so he thought we were safe. We sprinted and hid behind separate leather couches in the guy's living room. He came out into the kitchen wearing a bathrobe and got a glass of water, reading a magazine. We watched him from behind the couches as he took his time and finally went back up the stairs. We sprinted out of that house and back to my friend's house. It was pretty scary then, but it's absolutely terrifying now to think what could have happened. Story 25. It was a shared house that our ski club owned up in Vermont. We were renting it for the night, along with a few other families. All was fine until after dinner when I had to take a particularly bad dump. Naturally, the toilet clogged. I tried plunging, I tried flushing again. I tried other disgusting methods, but it would not go down. Knock, knock. A sinking feeling entered my stomach as I realized someone was at the door. This was the only restroom, and the contents of the toilet bowl were swimming around in a brown soup of disgustingness. I couldn't flush again, or it would overflow. And nothing was working, so I washed my hands and explained the situation to the waiting gentleman, who was a portly dude in a wife beater and worn jeans. He told me to get out of the way, which I did with haste. I don't know how he got it to go down, but he did. I apologized like 20 times. It was a terrible, smelly, revolting situation. At least I had enough toilet paper, huh? Story 26. I was at a relative's house for a family gathering when one of my distant relatives flipped out and grabbed a kitchen knife. I don't remember the details, but I'm pretty sure he was threatening people. I remember being ushered into a side room with everyone else and being cramped in there for like a minute or two just listening while a few male relatives who had remained outside with the guy encircled him, got him to calm down, and disarmed him. Story 27. The first time meeting my boyfriend's family, who live in another country, we stayed in his old attic bedroom. In the middle of the night, he reaches over and shakes me awake. "Huh?" I mumble, and he says, "Shh, be very still. I think there is someone else in the house." I lay motionless, thinking that someone has broken in and I'm about to be hit. Listening to the sounds of the old creaky attic, convinced every gust of wind is a footstep. He puts his arm around my head, covering my ears. I don't move for hours in fear until I hear him snoring. And that was the night I discovered, for the first time, he talks in his sleep. Story 28. So, story time. One day, my host family and I went to a family friend's house for lunch. After lunch, we were playing board games and I needed to go to the bathroom. Out of politeness, I asked, "Can you use your own bathroom?" And the host pointed to a door behind the dining room table. I walked into the bathroom, and there was a sink, a bathtub, and what looked like a toilet with no lid or seat, sitting very low to the floor. I looked around confused for a few minutes before thinking, damn, this must be some weird German toilet, and started peeing in the low bowl. The owner immediately shouted, "Ah, if you're looking for a toilet, this is it. About the neighbors." I panicked, stopped myself on the floor, and felt very embarrassed, thinking, what the hell did I just pee in? Their foot bath or something? I leave the bathroom, apologize, and say, sorry, I was a little confused, and go into the adjoining private bathroom with a normal height toilet with a seat and lid. I come back out very embarrassed, wondering if the landlord heard me pee in the bathroom and hoping I didn't pee where I shouldn't. Back at the table, I whispered to my brother, the landlord, what that thing was in the bathroom that I peed in. He said it was a bidet. It's weird that it was in another room. Do people have to climb from the toilet to the bathroom? Story 29. Stayed with my BF and his parents for a few weeks. One night, they left me home alone for a few hours. I decided to take a bath. Ventilation fan is on full blast, doors closed, water's running, so I don't hear the beeping. When I turn the tap off, I hear alarms blaring and a robotic voice saying, "Fire, fire, fire," and someone is banging on the front door. I run downstairs in a towel while calling up my BF. Neighbor's at the door because he heard the alarm. He has no idea who I am. Alarm company couldn't get a hold of anyone, so they called the authorities. Cop cars, ambulance, and a fire truck show up. Neighbors all crowd on the lawn. I'm still in a ducking towel. Firefighters conclude the steam from the bath set off the alarm. I die of humiliation and never take a bath there again. Story 30. This happened last week. My mom and stepdad went out of town and hired a pet sitter for 5 days. I was feeling burnt out from work and needed to do Christmas shopping. She lives 2 hours away near a lot of good shopping. So I asked her if I could stay at her house for 2 days. She was happy because she could shave a few days off the pet sitter and knew I was good with the dog. The first day, I pretty much sat around watching movies and hanging with the dog. The second day, I had to do shopping, but was being lazy, scrolling through Reddit. I was maybe 5 minutes from leaving the house when I heard a noise outside. I stood up but realized it was a neighbor loading something into their truck. As my eyes shifted away from the truck, I saw smoke. It was coming from behind the couch, almost like when you blow out a candle, but I hadn't lit any candles. I go around to the back to see actual flames inside the couch. I was so confused, but I filled up a thing of water and threw it into the burning couch. I did it a few times to be safe, then reached in to feel for hot spots. The wood inside the couch was all hot to the touch. It eventually cooled down and the fire was out, but I was still pretty confused as to how the couch caught fire. Remember, they were supposed to have a pet sitter that wouldn't have been to the house for another 6 hours. I would have been shopping for at least 3 to 4 hours, and the house definitely would have burned with the dog inside. I slid the small table that was behind the couch back into place and noticed a focused beam of light on the couch. My mom likes to decorate and has a glass crystal ball on the table. Now, I know this is a bad idea, but I don't really assess my mom's decorations very often. This crystal ball has been in the same spot, on the same table, with the same couch for almost a year, with no issues. This one day, where the sun came in at a perfect angle and I happened to decide to be at the house, when nobody should have been there, the ball focused the beam into a fire starter. They would have lost the house, the dog, everyone's Christmas presents, everything, because of a stupid table ornament. I had a long talk with my mom about science when I saw her again. I stopped it before it got out of hand, but still the random circumstance of the situation made it all very scary. Story 31. Tried to fill up a Zippo with butane. As soon as I lit it, the Zippo exploded in flames and went under Buddy's couch, and flames were coming from all edges of the couch. Flipped over the couch and grabbed the flaming Zippo with my bare hands and threw it out of the window. Friend never knew about it, as he was out at the corner store grabbing smokes. Never told him. Story 32. I got exploding diarrhea all over my best friend's bathroom. I got very close with her mom that night because I had no idea what to do, and she came and helped me clean it up. We grew apart after we graduated high school, but she still reminds me of it sometimes. Now it's funny, but it was traumatizing at the time. Story 33. I had hallucinations from a fever while staying over at a friend's and thought the dad was just downstairs screaming all night. It was like living through a horror movie. I still have nightmares about it almost 20 years later. The fever was so bad I had a seizure the next day. Story 34. It was my parents' home. They asked me to house sit. The neighbors knew they were gone, and called the cops on me. I guess the cops just hung out outside while waiting for the presumed burglars to come out. But when that didn't happen and the lights went out, they decided to come in. I woke to a bunch of cops shouting at me with drawn guns and flashlights shining, blinding me, and backlighting the pistol pointing right in my face. Story 35. I was at this stranger's house to give him some money for accidentally hitting him on his bike. I was also on a bike. And the first thing I noticed is that his house is really dark. Not in that his lights weren't on. His house didn't have lights at all. No ceiling lights or lamps or anything. Homeboy legit used a flashlight around his own house to get around and find things. Next thing I know, this guy, who I've spoken maybe 100 words or less to, is showing me a straight-up two-handed sword and matching dagger that are both razor sharp. This is one of those people who have a harder time being quiet than thinking of things to say. And next thing you know, I've been into every room in his place and met his pet parrot the size of a ducking eagle. The reason I was there in the first place was to replace a handmade Italian seat for his bike, and he ended up giving me a pair of $30 gloves, the old gloves that got a few scratches on them when I hit him, 5 to 10 high-end protein power bars, and a glass of strawberry lemonade. Definitely a strange experience. Story 36. Want to see a cool trick? Sure friend proceeds to hit his head against the wall, then falls flat to the ground and barely breathes. I panicked. We were alone. Turns out he wanted to prank me, but actually passed out. Woke up while I was panicking and decided to keep to his act. Also, this guy's dinner table was full of substances I didn't use, and we suddenly heard sirens and saw blue flashes through the window. We heard them kick a door and yell for a bit. Turns out it was a dealer next door. Lovely neighborhood. Story 37. My brother and sister are adopted from my uncle and his girlfriend at the time. They were, and still are as far as I know, addict who cared more about the substances than they cared about their children. When I was young, my parents were still trying to help them get their crap together so they could reclaim their children into a loving and stable home. It never happened. Instead, what happened was yelling and screaming matches at my uncle's trailer home, who was with another woman by then, or his ex-girlfriend's apartment. Neither one wanted to stop the substances. I remember being scared and upset at hearing my mom being so upset that she was yelling and screaming at these people. I honestly thought someone was going to be hurt, or worst. Eventually, my parents realized they'd never give up the substances, and they just adopted the kids outright. And I consider them my sibling. It's not all roses. My brother is in prison, but my sister is happy living with her husband and little daughter, who is just the cutest toddler in the world. Story 38. You know that one in Dumb and Dumber where Harry uses the broken toilet after all those laxatives? Well, that's it. I needed to pee at my brother's house, so I went upstairs to do it discreetly. Turns out my nephew had flushed a pencil down the toilet, and it was basically broken. I tried the plunger, but it just sprayed crafty water and made a mess. Telling them I needed help wasn't exactly a pleasant memory. Story 39. It was one of my first sleepovers. I was at my cousin's house, and I didn't know his house very well. I woke up to use the bathroom, but I wasn't quite sure where it was. All the lights were off, and everyone was asleep. It was complete black. I felt my way into the hall and walked to where I thought the bathroom was and only found the stairs. I tried to go back to the room, but I couldn't find it. I didn't want to make any noise as my uncle was working day turn and he needed to sleep. He was working swing shifts all the time at the mill and was really cranky if you woke him. I blundered around upstairs trying to find the door to the room that I was sleeping in but couldn't find it. I started to panic. Eventually, I had to call out for help as I couldn't even find a light switch. My aunt woke up and drove me back over to my grandma's house as I was in a complete panic. It doesn't sound like much, but it was a big deal to me at the time. Story 40. It was decided that whoever falls asleep first would get pranked. I nodded off to sleep at around 3 a.m. About 5 minutes in, I got shaving cream sprayed in my ear canal. Not only did it freak me out, but I had the feeling like water was stuck in my ear for over a week. Story 41. I was spending the night at a friend's place. We were taking a walk around the block and turning onto her street when her little sister runs out of their house and screams bloody murder. She starts running for us, yelling, "He's hit her! Friend's name! He's hit her!" We all run to the house, where the mom is getting beaten by the stepdad. It was a scary night for sure. Story 42. This is so awkward. I was staying over at a friend's house. We were in her basement when we noticed little beans were falling out of beanbag, and the beans were moving, I think because of static electricity. But we were convinced that ghosts were living in beanbag. They wanted to move the beanbag stuffing around on the imitation leather, like ghosts often do. We ran screaming upstairs to our babysitter, who was watching a sporting event. Well, my friend was screaming. I was laughing hysterically. That's how I learned that when I'm really scared, I laugh. Naturally, our nanny, my friend's older brother, thought we were just messing with him because I was rolling around laughing and babbling about ghost beanbags. He just told us to shut up and let him watch his sports. I guess that shows I had a pretty sheltered childhood. Story 43. I had a sleepover at my friend's house. During dinner that night, I had to use the bathroom, and when I finished up my business to return, I couldn't get out. The door handle wouldn't budge, and I had to shout for someone to save me. I was stuck in my friend's bathroom for about 30 minutes, and it freaked me out a good deal at the time. Story 44. I was at a friend's house late at night, and we were watching reruns of the classic Twilight Zone. His family was away somewhere, so it was just us in this big 2-story house. The episode we were watching was about a town shrouded in endless darkness, and everyone in the town hated each other, so the darkness was supposed to be a manifestation of their anger or something. Anyway, the episode comes to an end, and Rod Sterling starts his final narration. He says something like, "And don't let the darkness consume you," or something like that. I vaguely remember. And holy crap, as soon as Rod says those words, the power goes out in the house, and my friend and I are left sitting in the living room in complete darkness, shocked. It was the weirdest coincidence of my life. And no, it wasn't a prank because no one was home, and my friend never came out of the living room. Story 45. Watching The Ring on VHS. About 2 minutes after the film ended, my friend's house phone rang. We screamed bloody murder. It was her mom calling in checking on us. I was sleeping over that night, and her parents were out at a dinner party, so we were all alone in a huge house that was eerie, silent, and dark. Story 46. I was house sitting for an aunt of mine while she was on holiday. She told me there was a leak in the lounge area, but it was fixed, so if there were any issues to let her know. A massive storm happened a couple nights in. I heard some trickling in the early hours, so I went to go check that there wasn't a leak. The entire wall was flooding with water, like an actual waterfall. Turns out the spouting was blocked, and the water was just forcing its way through the cracks in the wall. I knew it wasn't my fault, but it was so terrifying watching someone's house fall apart on your watch, just piling towels on the floor and shifting furniture to keep everything dry. Story 47. I was house sitting for the first time at my best friend's place. He had 2 dogs. It was a split-level home, so I was in the downstairs with surround sound watching Event Horizon for the very first time. At some point, mid-movie, all of the power in the house goes off, and I am in pitch blackness and confusion for about 5 seconds until the power comes back on and the doorbell rings. The dogs start going nuts and barking at the door. I am at this point freaking out. I run straight upstairs to my friend's room and grab the BB gun I know is next to his dresser. I start inching back downstairs towards the door with the squirrel popper tightly in hand. I turn on the porch light, but no one is out there. The dogs are still riled up, though. At this point, I can see outside that it's raining. Hadn't heard the storm before because of the loud movie, followed by my pounding heart. I call my mom and ask her casually if the power went out at our house due to the storm. We lived about 5 minutes from my friend. She said no, but a funny thing happened. The phone line suddenly went dead. Now I'm starting to freak out a little bit because the power is still on, but the phone is dead. This is when cell phones were just starting to become normalized, but most people still used pagers. After about a minute or so, I'm trying to rationalize everything when the power goes back out. About 5 seconds pass, the power comes back on, and doorbell ring. The dogs start going nuts again. I had left the porch light on but didn't see anyone out there. So I herded the dogs back downstairs, locked the door, clutched the BB gun to my chest, and finished watching Event Horizon. Story 48. At a friend's house. He's brushing his teeth, so I decide to sneak up and scare him. It works. The toothbrush got lodged in his throat. He was gasping for air. How it happened. His dad saw this from the hallway and grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and led me to the living room, where he briefly yelled at me. Nothing too bad. Probably deserved it. He later apologized, and we all had a laugh about it, but damn, was that the scariest 10 seconds of my life at that point. If I remember correctly, he quickly dislodged said toothbrush, then dragged me to the living room. Then we both went to check if he was okay. Then the laughing ensued. Story 49. I remember being at one of my crush's house for a pool party he had. We were swimming, and I think it was from the Lizzie McGuire movie, I could be wrong, where I saw a girl and a guy swimming and flirting by pushing the other person's head underwater. So, as you may guessed, I did this to the guy. After I did this, he did it to me, but for way longer than I did it. I couldn't breathe, and I remember I had to get out of the pool and sit down for a bit to catch my breath. Yeah, I don't think he got it as me flirting. Story 50. Years ago, when I was babysitting an infant who was down for his nap, the family had an inversion table, and I decided I'd try it out. One of those things where you lay on a table, strap your ankles in, and then flip the table so that you're nearly upside down. Well, stupid me. Couldn't figure out how to flip the table back up so I could get out. Panicking, sweating, imagining the family coming home to the scene with their baby crying in the crib. I was mortified. I'm sure there was some quick release thing, but damned if I could find it. No idea how long I struggled, but I eventually hulked out of it somehow. I still get sweaty thinking about how badly that could have gone. What an idiot. Story 51. I'd often stay the weekend at my friend's house in a really rural area. I'm talking in the mountains with houses separated by half a mile of road and woods and maybe one streetlight every mile, very dark and creepy at night. His dad, Marine veteran, liked to hunt real in-a-woods type of guy, had a school bus set up deep in the woods. Every seat had been taken out except for the drivers and the front four. Behind those was 2 couches, a toilet, a TV, a water tank, a bed, a bookshelf, and a suitcase full of MREs. He'd often go on weekend-long camping trips in this bad boy. As a kid, this was an absolute prime hangout location. We'd spent months exploring the woods. However, this particular time of the year, there were a lot of mountain lions in the area, and we'd been warned against going too far in the woods. Well, that night, my friend had several people over, including myself and a few kids that lived nearby that were both older than us by a few years. We had all kinds of snacks, our Game Boy SPS with Pokemon, our Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and one of those old, bulky, portable DVD players, really set up for a night of debauchery. Well, around 10 p.m., we start to notice some strange occurrences. We'd occasionally hear some twigs snapping nearby. At first, one of the older kids noticed and was very freaked out by it, but the rest of us just played it off as some small critters running about. Then, the twig snaps started getting closer. One by one, each of us began to get more and more scared. Talk started about what we'd do if a mountain lion roamed up to the bus. All we had was a walkie-talkie to communicate back to the parents, and it would take a solid 10 to 15 minutes to make it to or from the house. After a while, the twigs stopped snapping and the tension slowly subsided. We went back to battling our Pokemon teams while eating Lays and having a jolly time laughing and cutting up. All memory of our previous fears had been forgotten, at which point, the bus starts shaking. At first, it was barely noticeable. The most paranoid of us were the first to point it out, and quickly we all fell into the same paranoia. Every couple minutes, the bus would shake slightly. We opened a window slightly, no wind, closed the window again. We shined our flashlights out, but I could see nothing. We began to discuss our fate. Then the shaking started to get much more noticeable and could no longer be written off as all in our heads. At this point, there was no discussion, except small utterances of abject horror and stifled whimpering. The shaking stopped. Quick glances to each other to confirm we'd all noticed. Suddenly, slow scraping along the back of the bus. There was no holding back and trying to act tough in front of each other. We all started screaming. The largest and oldest of us hid himself under a blanket, likely crying and saying his final prayers. Shortly after, we hear a low, deep growl at the end of the bus. At this point, we're all in hysterics, absolutely losing our mind in fear. We radio our friend's dad. His mom answers, and we're collectively losing our crap, screaming at her to get his dad to grab a gun and come save us. She begins freaking out, saying he's in the shower and that she'll get him out and he'll be there in 10 minutes. The shaking and noises stop, only for a few minutes. However, this time, we stay on edge. One of us suggests opening a window to see if the coast is clear. The bravest of us reluctantly opens the window, and immediately a huge mass slams against the window. We all begin shrieking in terror. The door to the bus starts violently shaking. We're all in tears and scream into the radio for his dad to hurry because we're about to be attacked. No response. The bus doors fling open. We all scream, jump, and scramble, hurdling objects to get to the back of the bus, and then laughter. Hysterical laughter. We all look back to the front of the bus, shaking from pure adrenaline, to see our friend's dad doubled over in tears from laughing so hard. He laughed for a solid minute before standing up. Man, I got y'all good. Get. Story 52. I would have a good amount of sleepovers at my friend's house. My fam always had tons of allergies to pets, so we never had any. My best friend had dogs and a really wonderful, special cat. But I didn't know anything about cats when I was little, so I'd kind of say hi, then run away. It's the summer and my friend has a tent and wants to sleep in the tent in his backyard. I'm not crazy about it, but we bring a bunch of blankets out and get all set up. When I wake up, it's light out, so maybe 7, 8 in the morning, and his cat is laying on my chest with her paws right under my chin and her nose like right near my nose. I'm laying there in mortal fear because I figure she's planning on hit me. She's purring, so that must have been a sign she was gonna strike. I remember sort of half moving to get her to go away, but she'd just sit there and kind of flex her paws a little. I think I lay frozen for like a good hour until she decided to do something else and got off. I barely escaped pass. As I grew up, she became a great friend. Whenever I'd go over, she'd come find me and sit either on me or next to me. Because of her, I love cats now and respect them. She was special. Story 53. TLDR, rescue dogs taught the power of hugs. So generally, I'm afraid of big dogs. I went over to my new friend's house to get ready to go out clubbing. Coming in, she introduces me to her stepdad's 3 Dobermans to help me get comfortable. All 3 are cute dogs, very friendly and wanting pets. I give each one a treat and we are all friends, right? So I'm feeling at ease. I don't think anything of it. We decide to ride together, so I go step outside and move my car while she does her makeup. As I head for the back door, I came in the front, dog number 1 cuts me off and stands in front of the door. I reach for the and there is snarling. Okay. I turn to head upstairs and the other two have me in a triangle. Not growling, just staring. I'm in a triangle of Doberman. I try to stay calm and take another step. The two in front step towards me, growling. I start to call up to my friend. Bad idea. I get one syllable of her name out, and now teeth are being bared. I'm now terrified. For context, I'm 5 feet tall and female. I try to reach for my phone, the triangle shrinks a lot, and growling intensifies. I realize this is how I'm going to pass. Their snarling, shiny white teeth bared, heckles up, closing in, and my friend appears, panicked, calling the dogs by name. They back off, she hugs me, then opens the door. All three of those gits wag their tails like everything is cool. Everything was not cool. It turns out they're rescues and some idiot taught them to keep people in the house until there is a hug. A literal hug. She was very apologetic about her brain fart. It's been years. We are super tight now, but the dogs are still not quite trained out of it. Most places don't deliver there anymore. I don't visit anymore either. She moved years ago. Story 54. I'm in my 20s and I had to stay at a colleague's house when I am visiting her town for business. Because the company made me stay at her house, they got her a brand new mattress for me to sleep in. I had a terribly stressful day that day, and we had some alcohol before we went to bed. That night, I didn't have a good sleep. It was nightmares after nightmares, and I just dreamt that I was in the bathroom. Then I wet the new mattress. I immediately woke up to find that I had wet the new mattress, and I went into panic. I tried to dry the mattress with my towels. Luckily, I brought more than one towels, and went to Google on what to do. The next day was the day I had to travel home. But before I left, and while she was at work, I washed the mattress. I told my colleague that I had my period and stained the mattress. That's why the mattress was washed and hanging on the balcony. She bought that story. Woo! That is literally the scariest thing I've ever done at someone's house. Story 55. When I was on high school, one of my friends was having a birthday party at their house. Now, I am kind of introverted, so at some point they were all in the kitchen doing something, and I was in the living room, sitting on the couch, just taking a short mental break. A little bit before this, one of the party guests, Jay, had their boyfriend, B, show up. He announced he was high, not sure on what, and a little after he passed out asleep on the other couch in the living room. While I'm taking my break, I look over at B, and I notice something off. He's twitching a lot now, and it's turning into full-on convulsions with each passing second. I call Jay into the room once I notice he's now foaming a little at the mouth. They all come into the living room and crowd around B. Someone's dialing 911. And I'm still on the other couch, like a dumb duck, because I don't know what else to do. Jay tries to wake B up, shaking him. Suddenly, he bolts up, screams, and stagger runs out the front door. At this point, my aunt shows up to pick me up, and I skedaddle out of there. As far as I know, the guy was fine, just having a bad reaction to whatever he took. I made new friends after this. Story 57. I spent the night at one of my best friend's house in elementary school. It was a super chill night. We were jumping on his trampoline, playing a little basketball and Xbox. Hell, we even watched Two Girls, One Cup, which was a big wake-up call for me. And it initially made me think the internet was bad, and YouTube was something I should stay away from. And it was the early days of YouTube, and I was young. But anyways, since we were hanging out, it was like 8 p.m. and our friend asked her mom to drive her over to this house to look at my friend's hamster that he was trying to sell. Anyway, this drove his mom over the edge, because when she showed up, she was super drunk and started yelling at my friend right in his face. Some of the meanest things I've ever heard. He just took it stone-faced, and I started crying, not knowing what to do. We walked out of the room, and then she followed us, and it eventually escalated to her just hit my friend. I ran away from myself as her goals were aimed at him and sat in his little sister's room as we both cried. And I remember just asking God why someone so dear to me had to live like that, because I could tell by his reaction that it was a regular occurrence. Finally, when it got really bad, his dad came home and instantly put me and my friend in the car and drove him back to my place. I stayed up all night talking to my mom and crying over what I saw. It was a big wake-up call for me to see how some people are raised. And it made me appreciate my parents and how calm they were with me, because I was definitely a little brat. I still think about that situation and get mad. Since then, I've seen this friend from time to time, and he seems to be doing pretty well, which always makes me happy. We graduated high school, and I think he's in college now. Anyway, sorry for the long story. I just had to put it all into words. I've never felt so helpless and so worried about someone I care about, ever. Story 58. My friend used to tell me about a ghost in the house that would turn on the radio in the kitchen when I left the room. He called it nonsense. About a month later, I was waiting for him to get out of the shower and was in the kitchen having a snack. As I opened the cabinet, the radio behind me would turn on. I winced, turned it off, and remembered this story. After that, I was afraid to go into the kitchen. It's scary, but it only happened to me once. His mom didn't want to throw it out or move it, afraid to piss someone off. I don't know what happened to that radio. Story 59. I have two. First, when I was a kid, I had a neighbor named Z, who was also my best friend. I often slept over at his house and saw a lot of things that I didn't realize as a kid, and that were all very bad. His parents were drunks. They were both pretty practical. The mother cooked and cleaned, the father worked, but it was pretty obvious that the couple valued smoking and drinking more than their son. Z had an uncle on his mother's side who had just gotten out of prison one day and came to live with them. The uncle was a terrible drunk. He was often aggressive with Z's father and acted like he was the head of the family. One night when Z and I were staying over, they fell asleep on the couches in front of the TV. The uncle came in and, without letting me sleep, woke Z up and started acting aggressively. I was startled awake by a scream and then opened my eyes to see my uncle hit Z. His mom and dad rushed to help, and his mom called the police, and my uncle was taken away, and it was just terrifying. Secondly, in high school, I made a seemingly normal friend named Jay. She was a little ditzy, but who wasn't as a teenager, so at first glance, I didn't find anything wrong with her. We hung out at school for a while, and then she invited me to sleep over at our place for the weekend. I said, sure, why not? And she happily accepted. It is still one of my biggest regrets to this day. Jay, for lack of a better word, was, and most likely still is, a psychopath. She showed me what she likes to do for fun, swapping pictures of random women with random guys in chat rooms, like trading cards or something. She also broke into her mom's bar to get some wine. When her mom came home and saw what she had done, she threw a huge glass vase into her closet so it shattered, and then went inside and hit herself on the shards while I sat on the edge of her bed in shock, but also too scared to say a word because rather than being upset or crying, she was furious and didn't say a word the entire time she was hitting her hands with shards of glass. Luckily, her mom said she was sending me home as punishment. I've never been so glad to be out of that situation in my life. Story 60. I wasn't in the house, I was outside. I went to visit my paternal grandmother. She kept the door locked, so she had to come over and open it when I arrived. Her living room has big windows facing the street, and you can even see the door from there. So I could easily see her and she could see me. My grandmother was weak and had arthritis, and she basically died shortly after that. As she was walking toward the door, she collapsed in the living room. I didn't have a key to the house, and I was panicking. I had no idea what to do. I was ready to ducking break the living room window or call 911, but she somehow managed to get back up, using the furniture to stand up and open the door. After that day, I asked my parents for the key to the house. I shudder to think what would have happened if she hadn't miraculously gotten up. I felt so helpless, almost as hopeless as the time my maternal grandfather fell while crossing a busy street and the street started moving again. At least that time I was able to catch my grandfather and carry him to the side of the road before the cars pulled up next to us. Moral of the story, watch out for falling elders. What's the strangest thing that you've seen at someone's house that they thought was completely normal? In late elementary school, I went over a classmate's house to find their refrigerator has a chain with a padlock around it. Apparently, the parents were just a wee bit controlling about food portion. Story 2. When I was 10, I was at my best friend's house, and his mom told him to go do a chore or something, and he said no. I was completely shocked and just blurted out, "You're allowed to say no?" A couple days later, he was mad at me because his mom wouldn't take no for an answer anymore and would say, well, Urist's parents don't let him say no. Story 3. Someone keeping chips and snacks in the dishwasher because they never used it. Apparently the story for them is they'd used the wrong soap for the dishwasher once, and the resulting mess freaked them out so much they decided to never use it again. Story 4. I once made the mistake in 2004 of accepting an invite to the weird kid at school's house because he said he had just bought GTA San Andreas. This kid's parents would openly spit on the floor carpet of their house. But that wasn't the worst part. Their toilet was broken, and when I told him I needed to go, he directed me to his backyard where his dad had dug a 4-foot deep hole where him and his family defecated. Needless to say, I chose to wait until I got home. Story 5. My house. Until I moved out of the house as a young man, I always thought grilled cheese sandwiches were made with a clothes iron, heating the sandwich between sheets of aluminum foil. Those were some flat of grilled cheese sandwiches. Story 6. Finally, I have been waiting for a question like this. When I was in high school, my dad's coworker had a photography business on the side from his government job. He agreed to take my senior year photos for a great price. Keep in mind, my dad only knew this man professionally. He seemed totally normal, married with a wife and kids in the suburbs. Said man also said that we can have lunch before the shoot. Sounds good. So there we were. My mom, dad, me, and siblings show up to this man's house. Every wall was covered, and I mean covered in paintings of women. I don't think there was an inch of bare walls. I'm not talking about Renaissance or tasteful paintings. I never saw one family photo. He gave us a tour of the whole house, saying that these paintings were one of a kind or first edition. All of it was super creepy. On the way back home, I remember as soon as the car door shut, I screamed, "WTF," and my dad was like, I swear I had no idea. He seemed like a normal guy. Pictures turned out great though. Story 7, 5 litter boxes overflowing with cat crap. The worst part is that he only has one cat. He dedicated an entire room to be filled with cat crap and piss, and apparently, instead of emptying the litter boxes, he just bought new ones. Story 8. My buddy had a jacuzzi right next to the pool. Jacuzzi and this portion of the pool were enclosed in the back porch, but you could swim under a wall to get to the rest of the pool. It was cool as crap. Story 9. Open house. Palace of a home. Marble countertops, breathtaking country view, 5,000 square feet of luxury master bedroom, was about 30 feet with king-size bed on one side. At the foot of the bed, across the room, was a raised section of floor about 6 feet in size, one step higher than the rest of the room. In the center of that podium was just one thing, a toilet. No master bathroom, just a throne on a podium to perch upon while, I presume, your spouse offers words of encouragement and enthusiastic applause. I went over to a friend from church's house. His mom was hella obese and didn't get up out of her armchair the whole time. The place was pretty messy, as you'd expect from an 8-year-old and a single mom who could barely walk, but overall, it wasn't that bad. The weirdness, she had 2 little dogs, like terriers of some kind. She kept a box of dog treats just on the ground, open on its side, with the treats spilling out and within easy reach of the dogs. Thing is, they wouldn't actually go for the treats until she gave them permission as a reward, and they were super excited to get them, like dogs normally are when they get one. It was the weirdest thing. They weren't trained in any other way except basic housebreaking, but I would be shocked if those dogs went for the treats when everyone was sleeping and there was no one around to notice. She trained them to only get treats on command so she wouldn't have to get up to give them treats. Story 11. I was at a friend's house party once while his family was away. I got told I could sleep in his mom's bed with my girlfriend. In his mom's room, there was a chest freezer next to the bed. Out of sheer curiosity, I wondered why the duck someone would need a freezer in their room. Turns out it's to store loads of loaves of bread. Like 20 of the gits. Story 12. Years ago, my roommate used to store dirty dishes in the oven until a girl we had over preheated the oven, melted the plastic cups, and started a fire. Story 13. Given my own home life, it'd have to be things like clean rooms and not feces. So instead, here's some crazy crap my parents do have done. Keep bags full of disgusting, smelly garbage that got too full to keep in the bin, in the kitchen next to the bin with a new bag in it. Throw garbage on the floor next to the bin and not pick it up. Keep rotting old food in the fridge for several years. Drink literally nothing but soda. Let cat crap accumulate in the litter box for a while. Throw returnable bottles and cans into the laundry room, including glass bottles. And I mean, throw literally. Leave opened can lids on the ducking kitchen floor so that I hit my toe on one as a child that contributes to a lifelong fear of blades and other sharp things. Huge stacks of boxes full of my father's reselling merchandise, including in children's bedrooms, towering over them while they sleep. A front door that once had scratch marks because the dogs would scratch at the door to get inside after taking a crap. Oh yeah, my mother also didn't have a fence or take the dog on actual walks or clean up after it, so the yard and frequently the neighbors' yards was filled with dog crap, becoming a rusted, sharp-edged, horrifying mess that was not replaced between when I was 3 and we moved to that house, and when I was 18, the last time I saw the house before my mother was forced to move out for not paying property tax for several years. Also, my bedroom had no door between it and my parents' bedroom, intentionally, because it made things easier on them when I was a toddler and much harder on me when I was a preteen. And the coup de grace, after we'd all made the jump to laptops and the ancient family desktop running Windows XP finally died its inevitable, horrible death, the computer room, which still housed the printer, filing cabinet, bookshelf, and also literally the only privacy in the house due to the aforementioned lack of door, became the place where my mother let the dog crap when she was too lazy or at work to let it outside. It was a disgusting, festering cesspool that she cleaned maybe once a year, and I thankfully moved out of town with my father at around the same time. Also, the house was constantly infested with both roaches and fleas. Not as bad as the mice I had to deal with when I lived with my father, but at least those were the awful a whole landlord's fault. I never really invited friends over story 14. I have this one friend who always complains about not having enough money. The fact he's always talking about it is a little annoying, but understandable, seeing we're both just uni students. I went over to his place one day to hang out, and it was the first time I've ever been there. Firstly, there was stuff everywhere. Aside from the floor, there was not a single uncovered surface in the house. That's not the weird part, though. It's a mess, but I've seen that before. What was really weird was the amount of $50 bills just lying around everywhere. There were more of these bills next to the TV in the kitchen and sticking out from behind furniture than I even have. Like, they weren't in one place or anything. There'd have to be at least $1,000 in randomly placed cash. Story 15. I was on the opposite end of this. I had a friend over once, and he stuck his hand out and leaned on the wall, and I gently pushed his arm down and said, "Don't touch that." He was like, "What? The wall?" I said, yeah, don't touch the walls. You'll leave fingerprints on it. I got a dumbstruck stare in return, and it was at that moment that I realized how strange it was that I grew up in a house where we were not allowed to touch the walls. Story 16. Old lady in assisted living had at least 100 antique toasters stacked and packed everywhere in her 500 Surreal front unit. On my way out, she gave my coworker and I a warm and sure shake and practically implored that I go to Goodwill and check out their toasters. Story 17. When visiting my buddy's college off-campus house, he had a plethora of snacks in his bathroom. I asked what they were for, and he said in case he got hungry when taking a crap or in the shower. Story 18. I have this friend who has a lot of cats. And with a lot, I mean she had at least 11 cats and 2 dogs. I'm all about having pets, but emo, you need to keep it to a minimum when you have a very small house, which was my friend's case. Now, why do I mention this? Well, when we were about to have breakfast in her kitchen, she suddenly put 2 little cat bowls in the middle of the tiny table filled with wet cat food, so you know it smells bad. 2 cats jump up and start eating out their bowls, with their tiny pinkish-brown anuses just staring at me, while I tried to ignore the smell and did my best working my breakfast, scrambled eggs, down. Apparently, she did so because the whole house already was filled with cat bowls, and if the cats got too close to each other while eating, they would start fighting. So she deemed the kitchen table a good location. When I finally thought, well, it can't get worse than this, a chicken jumps up on the chair in front of me. A freaking chicken. It just sat there, joining us at the table. And my friend barely looked up. So, needless to say, I was quite confused and weirded out. My friend, though, didn't seem to think there was anything wrong or unsanitary about this. Story 19. My sister-in-law's house she shared with her baby daddy. We knew they were living in squalor, and we were finally able to track them down. We arrived in some attic in the living room. I was horrified. No edible food in the kitchen, broken glasses littered the living room floor. No power. But they had an extension cord run to the neighbor's house so they could watch TV. No working toilets. They crap in buckets and dumped it in the backyard occasionally. He was illiterate, except he could read some words for food, so he would know what to steal from the grocery store down the road. At 7, the only word he could spell correctly was cookie. Now, I cannot tell this part without crying, and I'm a full-grown man. Tears are streaming down my cheeks as I type this, but I've got to tell this story because the sadness of this broke my heart. The oldest boy was so desperate for any type of normalcy that he had cleaned about a 3x3 foot area of one remote corner of one bedroom hidden behind a bed. He had meticulously picked the dirt out of the nasty carpet and had wiped the walls down as best he could. There, neatly lined up against the wall, were his little shoes with the laces all carefully folded into each one and the few Matchbox cars he owned carefully lined up in perfect order. That was the only part of his world he could control. I'll never forget seeing his little island and those little shoes among the chaos that was that house. That day, right after physically dumping the parents out of their bed and screaming at them to clean your ducking house, we take the 2 oldest to save them. The other ones had been dumped with other people at the time. We called the Department of Social Services on the way home, and in short order got the other children permanently removed. Fast forward 6.5 years later. We adopted the 2 oldest boys, and the other sibling, eventually 6 in total, 5 at the time, were also adopted out to other families. All are doing amazingly well, and we have regular get-togethers for the kids. They are all great kids. That little illiterate boy who had never been to school, he's now a tall, handsome, well-spoken honor roll student in advanced math classes, going into 7th grade. The younger one is very musically talented and wants to be a neurosurgeon. Our boys are both AB students with mostly A's, are polite and trustworthy kids. They are growing into fine young men that any parent would be proud to call their sons. I shudder to think what could have happened had we not tracked them down and took them. Story 20. I flip houses. One of the recent homes we did was in the outskirts of town, but still in a densely populated neighborhood. Not the nicest place. Typically, stray dogs would wander into our home and check out the noise from construction. This house was an absolute steal for us. Reason being, the owner was a hoarder. She was a sweet elderly lady who had a hard time signing over the house because she had lived there since the late 70s and had kept everything since she moved in. I mean, literally everything, including some 10 or so cats, one of which she lost in the home while moving, but I'll get back to this later. She had eventually filled the home with so much garbage that there was a mark on the wall, about 6.5 feet high. Mind you, she was an elderly, tiny, fragile woman. From her propping herself up to walk over the vast sea of garbage that flowed from her bedroom down the hall and filled her entire home, including the 2-car garage with about 3 feet high of pure garbage. The trash in her bedroom was above her bed. The trash in the bathroom was much higher than the toilet and bathtub. So how did she answer nature's call, you ask? She simply discarded her depends into the guest room, compiling a mountain of trash and adult diapers to the ceiling. Literally an 8-foot mountain of trash and crap. We found snippets of newspapers from the early 80s and forward, about 5 cat boxes full of crap, no litter. The cats were living under the trash, had chewed a hole into the bottom of a large bag of cat food, and ate out of that. We found her missing cat, which was miraculously alive, buried under loads of garbage in the garage. It ran for dear life once it got free. It took 8 40-yard dumpsters to clear the home of all the trash. She really thought this trash was normal, even of some sentimental value, and had a hard time departing from it. Made for a good flip though. Story 21. My daughter's friend lives in complete squalor. It's shocking. I can't imagine living like that. It's really sad. I gave her a set of cream-colored sheets a few years ago, and my daughter snapped a pic when she was out of the room to show me. The sheets are now dark brown. Seriously. She hasn't washed her sheets in years. Story 22. We were the weird ones. Once my dad finally left my mom, which was an entirely different crap show, he moved in with my stepmom and they weirded out together. The entire interior of the house was so overly decorated you could barely breathe. They smoked in the house, with the doors closed. Every piece of every window was covered with a different colored cellophane plastic wrapping. There were no doors anywhere, not even in the bathroom. And there was only one bathroom. It was right next to my dad's room. They slept in different rooms. Every door was covered with string bead doors instead. No privacy given. My room was definitely not allowed to have a door. Instead, I was granted with a lace curtain. They were free to walk in whenever they wanted. Any window that could open in the house was glued shut. There was a mixture of animal print tablecloths on every table. With lamps all over, that didn't work. The only light sources in the house were the white Christmas lights hung around the living room and kitchen. The other sources of light were from lava lamps. My stepmom had my room decorated with animal statues and animal print everything, and bright red cellophane wrapping on my huge sealed window. Nothing matched. She had a huge shelf that took up an entire wall in the living room, dedicated to glass figurines of all colors. Although it was overwhelmingly smoky, you couldn't find a speck of dirt or dust on anything. She kept it immaculate. I had to help dust. It was a chore of epic proportion. Their front yard was so overly decorated the mayor, I kid you not, knocked on the door and asked them to tone it down a little because it was just too much. Aside from all that, they were pretty cool people. Respected my privacy as much as they could, if I deserved it. Another strange thing is that they talked very, very low. Almost a whisper while in the house. So much so that I'm like that now too. My house, on the other hand, is pretty empty decoration-wise. My parents hate my apartment and try and bring over decorations so that it's not so echoey, as they put it, but I just take it and store it away. You could say I'm a bit claustrophobic now. Story 23. I didn't see this in person, but my apartment building and the 2 attached units were for sale, and there was an open house. So all day I sat with my door open and chatted with strange, wealthy people coming in and out. One of them stopped and told me I had the cleanest apartment of the 3, which shocked me a little. I asked what the others were like. He said, well, how do I say this? It seems they have about 8 cats that stink like hell, and something that looks like a cereal shrine. There's a table with about 20 cereal boxes in a circle, surrounding a glass pitcher of milk. It's freaky. I never got around to seeing this, but I love that description. Story 24. I had a friend whose father had probably 6 to 8 30-gallon garbage bags full of buttered popcorn in his basement at all times. I forget why he had so many, but we used to eat a lot of popcorn. Story 25. Went to my friend's house in middle school and her family computer was in the living room and her dad had animated girls dancing on the desktop. So normal to her. Story 26. I was asked to do dishes at a place I was staying, no problem. Loaded up normal dishes in the washer and started it, then started cleaning the pots in the sink. The kitchen flooded and I got yelled at as a grown adult by another adult. I was pissed because everyone knows the kitchen floods if you run the sink and the dishwasher at the same time, and the other people in the house berated me for being so stupid. I have done dishes like this a ton of times before and never flooded anything, and I've done it at other houses since then and never flooded. Even in my damn apartment, it wasn't a problem. Story 27. I was the only person to show up at my friend's birthday party other than his extended family, who all lived in the same mountain neighborhood. His whole house had this nasty smell to it, like rotting plants. I'd never been there before and didn't want to be rude, so I just ate party snacks in the kitchen while we waited for other people to arrive. I finished some watermelon and asked where the trash can was. My buddy and his mom directed me to the kitchen's back door, which led to a 6-foot drop in a pile of decomposing fruits and vegetables. They also had just set up a downhill zip line, which was pretty dope, except that you had to drop off at just the right time to land on an old track high jump mat, instead of the rock metal pile behind it. My buddy's sister nearly passed when she did a full flip and missed the mat. My family, who had come to pick me up, and I just stared at each other like, "Did you just duck and see that?" While my friend's mom just calmly said, "Oh dear, let's get you cleaned up." And my buddy shouted at his screaming sister, "I told you to let go, Linda." But no, you just had to do it your own way, and that's why you got hurt. Weird family. Story 28. I used to fix TVs for Samsung in people's homes. I've seen some crap. It doesn't matter who you are or how you live. If you bought one and it dies under warranty, and one place was a big Victorian house. I'm let in and see no sheetrock or plaster on the walls, just the insulation paper between the studs. The stud all had those little nails that used to hold the lathe, the ones that are very time-consuming to remove and prevent actually nailing up some sheetrock. On these nails were hung all sorts of decorations, Christmas lights, full-size inflated Santa in the corner, huge 6-foot-long fish tank, and a full-grown live pig under the kitchen table. The lady was reading the paper and rubbing the pig's belly. Little girl playing some computer game like it's all cool. Story 29. My family and I decided to buy a horse advertised for sale on the internet. We drove to the woman's house. She had some fields around the house where she kept the horses. The place was badly run down, and the fields were full of weeds. I needed the toilet while we were there, and she said I could go into her house and use it. I have never seen a house in such an appalling state. As soon as you walk in, you see that there are huge, almost the size of a human, sacks of dry dog and cat food, which are open and have been tipped over, and the dog/cat biscuits have spread all over the entire floor. Nobody has bothered to pick them up, and they've obviously been like that for ages as they are all broken and trodden into the carpet. Well, you can barely see the carpet at all. There is so much other junk that there's barely any light, as the windows are blocked by junk and you can barely move in there. Then I went into the toilet and it was obvious it had never been cleaned. The toilet bathroom was also full of junk and everything. The sink, toilet, walls, and floor were brown and crusty with filth. It was the filthiest place I've ever seen, and the owner seemed to think it was totally normal. Story 30. Went to an open house in my town. Realtor told us that the couple were getting a divorce. The man had left his wife. She was a bit strange. So we make our way up to the master bedroom, and the only piece of decor was a long glass display case like you might use to showcase a model ship or car. It was about 2 feet long and 8 inches square. Inside was something that looked like a ticker tape rolled up at one end and pulled across the length of the case. It was a life monitor readout that slowly flatlined to the end. Across the bottom of the case was displayed a ponytail. Story 31. My parents would go on vacation and leave me with the sitter at her house. I remember they would all dump sour cream in their spaghetti. At the time, it really grossed me out. I had never seen anyone else spaghetti that way before. Story 32. It's quite common in the suburbs around Pittsburgh to have a toilet in your basement, not near anything. Sometimes literally in the middle of the room with nothing around it, just out in open. They're so common, we call them Pittsburgh toilets. Story 33. I was out late with some coworkers at the apartment of one of our bosses after a team outing with a lot of drinking. It was me, 2 coworkers who were about the same age as me, another coworker who was several years older than us, and our boss, who was probably in her late 40s. We were all hanging out on the balcony out back when some of her neighbors noticed she was out and told us all to come over. Our boss told us to go and meet these guys because they were awesome, so we went. When we got there, they introduced themselves and gave us all a drink, even though we all already won in our hands. Then they gave us a tour of the apartment, which was pretty typical until they got to their bedroom. And this is our leather wall. The 2 coworkers who were around my age and all exchanged looks that conveyed the sentiment of WTF. It was literally a giant piece of plywood that had been upholstered and hung on a wall. It was just a wall, mostly covered by leather. They were actually really nice, friendly guys, and we ended up hanging out for a bit before leaving, but I still think that leather wall was pretty bizarre. Story 34. I may have caused this in someone else. My family had a party, and we were dumping out the ice from our cooler after on our grass. The little neighbor girls came over and asked what were we doing. My dad and I look at each other, purposefully put on a confused face. Then I turn to the girls and say, "You two don't ice your grass?" One sheepishly responds, "No." My dad finishes with, "Oh, that's weird." And that was the end of that conversation. I wonder how long I messed up those girls' perception of lawn care. Story 35. Me was having dinner at a friend's house. One of the cats was walking around in the dining room table. When it started eating off my plate, I gently nudged it away. I really like cats and animals in general. I wasn't angry, but I didn't want cat spit on my food. My friend's mom completely lost it. She was screaming at me for, and I quote, interfering with the free choices of another sentient being. She scared me half to death, and I apologized, but she was still yelling. It was surprising to me because they seemed like a normal suburban family. The house was clean and so on. Story 36. My mom had a friend that lived up the road that was an ex-pole dancer that gave pole dancing lessons. She lived in a nice double-wide trailer with a really nice room with stage, 2 poles, lights, fogger, full bar. It was a nice setup. That's not the part that was weird. You know those Christmas towns they sell at Hallmark or whatever? She had a huge Halloween one set up. A dozen little haunted houses and 100 little creepy figurines in the middle of summer. And it was very well done. She was very proud of the tiny figure of Dracula. It was cool, but odd. She was like a grandma showing off her little collection. Story 37. The bathroom only had a toilet in it. The bathroom sink was in a completely different part of the apartment. Hungarians seem to like making as many different fractured bathrooms in their apartments as possible. Story 38. I used to have some friends that lived in the dirtiest, most squalid conditions I've seen in my life. They never cleaned their house. Like ever. There was trash all over. One time, their friend came over and was sick and ended up puking on the couch, floor, and heater vent. They just threw a towel over it. They also had ferrets and a cat, which only added to the smell and general disgustingness. The bathroom sink was not visible due to all the makeup, pencil shavings, hair all over. The tub was black. They hung black sheets on the walls, which the cat would sometimes climb. Completely gross. Then they asked if they could live with me for a while, and were offended when I said no. Story 39. Had this friend who I would spend the night at his house over the weekends. His family was pretty cool, and they always did things together. One night, we're playing video games, and his mom walks in asking my friend why he didn't take the garbage out earlier. My friend turned and yelled, "I'm busy with a friend, Mom." God damn. His mom started yelling too. "Don't be a crap and take the ducking garbage out." He took the garbage out. That was that. I was shocked. My parents would have whipped my ass and then grounded me for a month. Another one, same friend. We were much older and in high school. His new room was above the garage, which was separate from the main house. His mom, dad would come check on us every once in a while. In one particular instance, his mom and dad stopped by to let us know they were leaving to go see a show. At first, mom peers in asking, are you all behaving? Friend, yeah, the usual, you know. Substances. Dad pops in. Need me to leave some extra money in that case? They all had a hearty laugh. No one's family was as laid back as theirs.